with Seema on MTV Sports for another round of intense and exciting debate. And the topic of discussion today would be whether or not current laws are adequate to protect intellectual property rights in Sri Lanka. And we have with us two well-known schools within Season 1. They're not strangers to Stein Studios. Introducing to you your proposition for today, Lyceum International School, Debetor, and your opposition for today, St. Sylvester's College, Kandy. Manufacturing and retail services. He's also Group Director of the Capital Maharaja Limited. Welcoming into the studios Mr. Srilal Ahangama. We also have with us Mr. Ajit Gopitia, CEO of TriConsult, and also the past president of the Colombo Toastmasters Club. We also have with us Ms. Shahara Diwaria. She is the Secretary General of the ICLP Arbitration Center, and she's also a partner of the FJ&G Debetor. Keeping our hopes high for a passionate exchange of words between St. Sylvester's and Lyceum, ready to move into the opening statements, I can now invite our first speaker from the proposition, Praveen Ratnavira.
Prior permission from the panel of judges. What is intellectual property? It means the right resulting from the creations of the human mind. For the benefit of this debate and the time factor, we refer to intellectual property as IP and intellectual property rights as IPR. Now, I shall contextualize based on the Fifth Agreement. In order to effectively benchmark and determine the adequacy of the current laws protecting IPR, we will compare ourselves with peers of equal legal and IPR development status. Now, let's take a look at where we are in terms of IP and the growth of IP since the introduction of the current Intellectual Property Act and other related legislation. Since the introduction of the number of patents has increased by 200%, trademarks by 65%, and industrial designs by 87%. This clearly indicates that the current Act and laws have allowed the development and greater use of IPR. We believe that in order to allow better use of these IPRs, the protection provided to IP status must be adequate and at an equal level. And that the statistics that I have given you show that in the status quo, at a glance, we see no problem but continuous improvement of IP and IPR in Sri Lanka. Now, to the burden of proof. We have to show that the laws that are currently in place are adequate to protect the existing intellectual property rights in Sri Lanka. We will show you how the current status quo does not need to be changed since it is adequate to the current context and economic and social status of Sri Lanka and then the international community. Now, defining an adequate law. In order to make this discussion fruitful, let's first take a look at the characteristics of an adequate law. A set of laws is classified adequate if they have the following characteristics. It satisfies the objectives of the law, it balances the objectives of the law, it balances the interest of all parties, contains remedies and enforcements to rectify the injustice and provisions. So throughout this debate, we will show you how our case development that the following characteristics are present in the current laws that protect our IPRs. Thank you.
Let me now invite the first speaker from the opposition, Dave Houghton.
Honorable panel of judges, ladies and gentlemen, ideas are the key factor for the development of any country. They contribute vastly towards the growth of an economy, and thus they should be well protected. And that is why we Sylvestrians are here on this day to prove that the current laws are not adequate to protect intellectual property in Sri Lanka. Intellectual property, as defined by the World Intellectual Property Organization, are creations of the mind, and adequate, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, is satisfactory or acceptable in quality and quantity. The current main act that governs intellectual property in Sri Lanka is the Intellectual Property Act No. 36 of 2003. It has been 10 years since this act was introduced. Do you not think that the technology has developed within these 10 years? Back then, did you ever think that you could just transfer a song wirelessly via Bluetooth, or you could just copy and paste a software. No, my friends, the technology has developed rapidly, and it is high time that we change the Intellectual Property Acts accordingly. Presently, many people are unaware of the intellectual property laws, so they freely violate them. Due to the failure of practicing these laws properly, we see high piracy rates in our nation, and we see ideas being stolen everywhere. For a country to be well developed, it should have foreign investments, and it should possess people with creativity. But foreign investors are afraid to invest, knowing that their ideas and designs will soon be counterfeited. Inventors hold up their creativity, fearing that this innovation of theirs will be stolen and someone else may take credit. My friends, this is the current situation of our nation. But still, we choose to ignore these facts and carry on with the current inadequate laws. Ladies and gentlemen, it is high time that we change this. And as a developing country, we should pay more attention to protect our valuable ideas. And my colleagues will furthermore prove why current laws are not adequate to protect intellectual property in Sri Lanka. Thank you.
And our final speaker from the proposition, Mahim De Silva.
With prior permission from the Honourable Panel of Judges, members of both teams and both listeners. Now I will be showing to you the 3 levels of adequacy that are related to the protection of IPR. First, adequacy based on the TRIPS Agreement, Civil Procedure Code and the IP Act. Secondly, adequacy of the assertion of the owner rights model. And thirdly, adequacy of the Intellectual Property Act. Moving on to my first level of adequacy. Team Lyceum believes that on a first level analysis, the TRIPS Agreement through the WTO plays a role in determining the level of adequacy of the current laws. Firstly, this means that our IPRs are being protected by a set of laws that have been discussed and reviewed not just by Sri Lankan lawmakers but also by the international community. Secondly, we see that currently Sri Lanka has been awarded several concessions and subsidies by the WTO through the TRIPS Agreement in order to improve the system of law revolving around the IPR. Therefore, we believe that our current laws are adequate and provide protection to IPR. Why do we say this? Let us take another organization, the IMF for example, would cut back on its loans, increase the interest rates and take other measures if we breach their loan covenants. In the same way, since the TRIPS Agreement under the WTO was established for the purpose of developing better IPR laws and systems, if Sri Lanka's current laws are inadequate to a significant extent, in the concessions received by the government would reduce or be cut short. However, this is not the case, indicating that on the first level of laws are adequate to protect IPRs, and according to the TRIPS Agreement, we certify this case. Now, responding to what the opposition said, they came and told you that the technology has developed after the act was proclaimed. But we see, because of the technology development, we see that amendments have been made throughout, and therefore we see that the act has been proven much more practical, and therefore the act to be worked out, the act has been, the value has added to the act, and therefore we believe the current laws are adequate to protect intellectual property in Sri Lanka.
Our final speaker from the opposition, M. Arshad, on stage.
Good afternoon, Honorable Panel of Judges, respected opponents, team members, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, what does the intellectual property cover? I would like to say, intellectual property is an umbrella term that covers copyright, patents, trademarks, designs, circuit layouts, plant breeders' rights, and confidentially trade secrets. Each of these terms covers a different type of property that is made up of knowledge. Many of these terms cover physical objects. However, it is the idea behind them that counts and need to be protected. The above mentioned terms are all for the different types of intellectual. Patents are for product. A patent is a right for a limited period to stop other things making, using, or selling an invention without permission. Trademarks are for words such as smells, logos, and pictures. Trademarks are for words. A sign that trademarks are for words such as smells, logos, and pictures. A sign that can distinguish goods and services from one trader from those of another. Designs are rights for shape of something. Copyright is for literacy. For example, music, films, multimedia, and computer programs. Some of the reasons we say that the prevailing laws are not adequate, not sufficient to protect intellectual property are: there occurs a huge number of theft on intellectual property in form of music, movies, and trademarks, and the culture of new generation have become one of the internet surfing and peer-to-peer downloading and hacking. Further, there are no measurements or indicators to differentiate trademark from one another. And what about the patent? Just after 20 to 15 years, your patent expires and it will be in hands of public. Due to the above said, some of the reasons, we Sylvestrians say the current laws are not adequate to protect intellectual property in Sri Lanka. Thank you.
To the conclusion of the opening statements, we're ready to move into a very short commercial break. Stay tuned, we'll be back with the face-off round. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Debetor with Seema. The duel is between St. Sylvester's and Lyceum, ready to heighten up the passion and intensity, as ready to present to both the opposition and the proposition a chance to directly quiz their opponent's stance. Proposition, opposition, the floor is now yours.
With prior permission of the panel of judges, I will now move on to the second level of analysis that my earlier speaker was talking about. Adequacy of the assertion of owner rights involved model. The assertion of owner rights model is a model that we have identified and that is currently being used in Sri Lanka now. This model, in simple terms, allows each party to assert their own rights and protect their intellectual property. One, I will now speak about the responsibilities of both parties, responsibilities of the owner of the IP or IPR. The owner of the IP will register and ask the state to recognize his intellectual material as an IP, and also he will have to take the first step in approaching the law enforcement and filing a complaint if his rights are violated by any outside factor. And now also the responsibilities of the law enforcement bodies, being that they will facilitate a smooth process of regulation and registration, and also they will provide for law enforcement mechanisms that will help to assist owners of the IP to assert and protect their IPRs. This is why we believe that the government so far, that the current laws in place are adequate to provide protection and deliver justice to the IPRs. Yes, sir.
As per the book Law Modern Society book, second edition by PSIR, page 89 states, a law is immensely complex social machine. It is continually in need to be patching and repairing, and from time to time overhauling in this or that area. I have not finished. Work is increasing. We have most look perfection or finality.
So this is exactly why we have amendments. This is why we have the TRIPS agreement, because we need patching up, and this patching up has actually increased the amount of patents, trademarks, and everything, as our earlier speaker told you all. Yes, sir.
My dear brother, the law is not a law until it is system. A law is not a law until it is put into an act, until it is embraced, until it is incorporated under the act, under the law system.
So, sir, don't you believe that the amendment itself is a form of improving the act, and the TRIPS agreement itself is, a part. It improves the act so that we don't have that. That's the whole point of amendments being there, sir. Now, sir, yes.
My sister, you may debate on the topic that the prevailing laws are adequate to prescribe the intellectual property of Sri Lanka, not to protect the property of Sri Lanka.
Exactly, that's my point, sir. I'm saying that we should have the current laws that are in place in Sri Lanka are adequate to protect the intellectual property rights that are in Sri Lanka, not prescribe it or anything like that. Now, moving on to the justification of my model, our team as a whole believe that we will show you all why and how the owner should assert his own rights, and it's not the total responsibility of the government to do everything for him. Firstly, by letting the owner to assert his own rights, we are facilitating maximum choice. This means that each individual or company has a choice and has control over his IP. So that's why I believe that the facilitation of choice is important, because it's not whether the owner gives a consent. It's how you should assert your own rights, take it into your head to actually go there and get your violated rights reserved. And also the freedom of privacy is infringed when the government tries to do everything for you. It will become a total nanny state where the government does everything.
Panel of judges, ladies and gentlemen, as per review on the act and its new amendments by a professional on the intellectual property on Sri Lanka says copyright is a protection has traditionally been reviewed as an offering of incentive for the production of artistic, scientific and other creative content while permitting the public to access to use innovative and such creative work. Even well-educated person says that copyright production has horse to creep through. That's my sister.
So don't you believe that by permitting the public to use the copyright to a certain extent, that it is actually a characteristic of a good law?
My dear sister, if you have made a film, if you have written a book, will you allow somebody to use your wording, your things to be presented by someone else? And moving on, tell me how often a person has been punished for piracy in Sri Lanka. I believe most of the time the answer is no.
So you said that the copyrights cannot be used by anyone, a book that you wrote, but I state that there are certain exceptions, teachers and non-educational profits can use it. So don't you believe that this is also, according to you, an infringement of their rights?
Of course, that's what it is. This is an infringement of their rights. This is when you are using their words, when they are using their terms in your commercial, in your profit, it is infringement of their rights. And moving on. If you are watching television and listening to radio, in most of this advertisement they say don't be misled by imitations, don't be misled by counterfeits. This simply says that the genuine producers, the rights holders, they know there are infringements, there are counterfeits in the market. But what they can do nothing but just advertise. They are spending millions, billions for their innovations, and they are spending again thousands, 100,000 to advertise them, not to be counterfeited, not to be misled by imitation. The authorities are not using their powers properly. Authorities are not using their authorities doesn't have the scope to cover all these issues accordingly. And moving on, the most vital issue of counterfeiting, and I see, is imitating of drugs. And as I above have extensively testified and justified on the very real, terrible dangers of domestic counterfeiting, particularly is most of these infringements are done for profit and criminal syndicates. And as I give you an example, if you go for a pharmacy and you ask for amoxicillin, and they will give you 3 brands. One brand they will give one tablet for 5 rupees. And the next one 5 tablets for 10 rupees. And the next one 10 rupees per tablet. There are 3 qualities. There are 3 qualities in the same cover, the same amount. It is completely contradictory, and this is a matter of life and death, my dear brothers. What are the remedies your act have for this? And moving on, violation of intellectual property rights poses a tremendous threat for the prosperity of Sri Lanka and its creative industries. The knowledge industry of a country worth millions and billions, and it deserves utmost attention. Attention must be consistent and long-term if they are to be successful. So I do believe that we can continue to improve the global situation, the benefit of rights holders here in Sri Lanka, throughout the world. Thank you.
With prior permission from the panel of judges, members of side, opposition, proposition and worthy listeners. Now, ladies and gentlemen, looking at the third level of adequacy under our argument, what we are trying to say is that there are checking and balancing mechanisms, which is the Director General in Sri Lanka. And the checking mechanism for the Director General in Sri Lanka is in turn the judiciary and the government. Now, ladies and gentlemen, under the Act which the opposition itself quoted, Act number 36 of 2003, yes, we are aware of it, that in that Act they state that what protects the intellectual property rights in Sri Lanka are the patents, are the copyrights, and are the geographical indications. Bringing your attention to one of the main rights that are protected in Sri Lanka. Take for an example patents. And I would like to point out that side opposition here came and told us that the patent can last only for 20 years. But ladies and gentlemen, according to the act which they itself stated, Act number 36 of 2003, it says that after 70 years after the owner has died, yes, the patent will still remain and the profits of that product or the patent will go to the family. Ladies and gentlemen, another point which side opposition here brought out and we saw as one of the main clash points here are that yes, they said it seems to be that side opposition here is very selfish. They are trying to say what they exactly told us was that later it will go on to public interest and the rights of the owner are not protected. But what we are trying to support here is, and we are trying to tell you that there is adequate law in the country because we believe in the betterment of society. The society has to grow and in turn lead to economic development. Yes, sir, your point.
Can you set me an example? Can you give me an example where patent and copyright are protected in Sri Lanka?
Yes, sir. Like y'all itself quoted, look at Act number 36 of 2003, where it says that that it is protected. And what is protecting these intellectual property rights? Sir, what you all have failed to see is that copyright is not an intellectual property right. It is what protects your right. Yes, sir, your point.
All your statements, you didn't give me an example. I asked for an example.
Yes, sir. As my first and second speaker both told you, they spoke about copyrights and trademarks. They told you that that lots of industries in Sri Lanka, and they also brought out the piracy on the internet. But looking at it on this perspective, sir, firstly, any rational being, no one in Sri Lanka is suppressed from exercising their rights, from asserting their rights. No one in Sri Lanka is held back because of this copyright, which you all are saying is inadequate. But ladies and gentlemen, take for an example a big company that was in the music industry. Nothing is stopping them from asserting their rights, and also there is long-term utility for the producer and those who are producing these music videos and movies. So ladies and gentlemen, what we are trying to tell you is no one here in Sri Lanka is being set back of asserting their rights. And what we are trying to tell you is there is always some sort of benefit that comes out of this, and that is exactly what is stopping them. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, as side proposition, we believe that the current laws are adequate in Sri Lanka and firmly enacted.
Panel of judges, ladies and gentlemen, let me continue the debate. Honestly, do you think it is fair and moral to use the intellectual property of someone else without their permission for your own benefit? How would you feel if someone else was awarded for your work or performance? My dear friend, the laws of Sri Lanka does not protect intellectual property rights to the same extent as those of the United States and are unsuccessful in protecting intellectual property rights. Unauthorized use of our intellectual property rights will result in loss of clients and increased competition. Strong intellectual property laws will lead to developmental benefits for all countries regardless of their economic status.
Sir, do you not realize that you can't benchmark Sri Lanka with the United States of America because we are a developing nation and USA is a developed nation?
Are you aware that USA is better when it comes to laws and we should follow their steps?
Sir,
also, are you aware that Sri Lanka is one of the top 10 countries in software piracy, rating at 84%, though the laws were in place since 2003, the ratio is high in Sri Lanka.
So you simply cannot benchmark us with the United States because we are a developing nation and we have different needs, and that's why at the beginning we contextualize this debate to the TRIPS agreement.
My dear friend, I am not benchmarking them. I am not benchmarking them. I am saying you, we should consider their steps. We must follow them. I am not saying that we should take the law, we should extract their laws. I am saying we should consider what they do. Moving on, according to the prominent newspaper, the laws do not make it mandatory for Sri Lankans to use genuine software. Because in 2003, the Intellectual Property Act was passed as a comprehensive intellectual property law, bringing Sri Lanka in compliance with the relevant treaties from a regulatory perspective.
Point, sir. So are you aware that it was because of Sri Lanka that they amended the Act?
Excuse me?
Are you not aware that they amended the Act because of Sri Lanka and we didn't comply with them, they were complying with us?
The thing is, I am here to talk whether the laws are adequate or not.
But you have to get your facts right on
Okay, I'm moving on. Let me go. My dear friend, yesterday I purchased a valid OS DVD at a mere price of $200, whereas the real deal cost more than $150 US. Yet you are claiming that the laws are sufficient enough. Are you aware that there are many shops in Sri Lanka that operates under the same name with different owners, and some of them are not even aware of their existence?
Sir.
What has the law done to prevent such unethical activities?
Sir, nothing is stopping this producer to go and assert his right. It is his right of choice there.
What is law if it doesn't stop? Also, my dear friend, one of the senior lawyers who practiced law for more than 14 years and has specialized in intellectual property says that we don't have government quotas anymore, and thus we need to attract the best companies to invest here and make every effort to keep those who are already here. But if we are not able to protect their brand or properly enforce our IP legislation, they will go elsewhere. He said, adding that 2 years ago, a certain US clothing brand wanted to quit Sri Lanka, disgusted with that fakes of their garment being manufactured and imported from Sri Lanka. Unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, there hasn't been a study on how intellectual property laws and its implementation affect the country's economy. My dear friend, just imagine if our country...
Point, sir. Sir, this debate is whether the debate lies as to whether the laws are adequate or not. It is not about how practical this is, because it's whether it is adequate or not.
Do you know the meaning of adequacy? Adequacy is satisfactory or acceptable in quantity and quality. Okay, moving on. How many of you here have used a pirated CD or DVD? Downloaded a song online? Well, I have done all of them, and I don't see myself being punished.
Point, sir.
What you don't realize is that you are infringing on someone else's intellectual property right. And my dear friends, these songwriters, musicians, filmmakers, they take pride in their work. And disrespecting their work is infringing. Considering all the factors that I proved, what I would like to say is that there are so many wonderful people with amazing ideas in Sri Lanka that could lead to wonderful creations and innovations. I believe, we Silvestians believe, that the next Bill Gates or Stephen Hawking might be from Sri Lanka if laws regarding intellectual property rights are made adequate. Thank you.
With the conclusion of the face-off round, we're ready to move into a very short commercial break, leaving time for the teams to consult their coaches and to receive a third-party opinion about their game plan so far. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're done with the consultation of coaches. Both the teams have spoken to their coaches, received some last-minute advice, and we're ready to move into one of the most tense rounds of the debater, the rapid-fire round. This requires quick thinking and a rapid build-up of arguments. Each team will receive a span of 3 minutes. Proposition, opposition, flow is now yours.
So regarding the piracy issue, whether the person's right is being infringed or not. So are you aware of the fact that in reality the artist has provided his consent to the distribution of his IP because he realizes that in this free distribution provides for a higher utility in the long run due to the publicity and increased fan base, etc. This offset with the disutility caused due to piracy. Thus, the artist makes a rational decision to provide consent by not acting.
My dear friend, are you aware that the movies which are produced today are being pirated the next moment they are being released? The producers are not making profit out of it, they are making a huge loss. Also, Sri Lankan law is a part Roman Dutch law and part English law. How could another country's law be effective in ours?
So when you think of movies, what we see is that the director of the movie wants this certain movie to be reused and to be republished because it increases the market. Increases the market for the film through the piracy, through piracy of this certain film. It is being published several times so that the people can witness this film again and again, and therefore the person is taking a decision not to act, and therefore is giving the consent for the film to be published.
My dear brother, I guess you're unaware of what is internet. When you download a movie via internet, when you're downloading a movie, the owner or the producer of the movie doesn't get any profit out of it. And your last member says, you say owner should protect their property. If owner should protect their property, why there is a law?
So don't you believe that indeed the owners of the movie are the ones who do get all the profit? And also moving on to my justification of the model, we believe that, as we told you at the onset of this debate, that the purpose of the judiciary system is that it should provide flexibility, direction, and more importantly, maintaining justice and ensure that all individuals' freedom and rights are upheld. We believe that by letting the owner assert his or her own rights, we are facilitating optimum choice, and this is really important because it doesn't matter whether it's your choice or not. You should give your consent. You should
hear what the judges have to say about the performance of the debaters today.
They seem to have believed in what they were trying to say. I even saw some of them kind of lose their temper, which is quite good. I think I got a good flavor of what they were trying to say. I don't know if they've done enough research, but I think the lady lawyer on the panel will be able to talk more about the content. But I thought they both did brilliantly well, and I was very impressed.
In both parties, they tried to build up a strategy, but I didn't see the required key components of a strategy being built over the debate to the culmination of the finals. So finals actually probably happened at that way, and both teams did very well in terms of culminating the debate. But I think both teams should have worked a little bit more on building up a strategy to bring the debate to the area that they want to, so that they can be comfortably knocking the opposition down. And in terms of style, both teams had a lot of passion, as it was said, and communications were really good. But I think it is also important to play a little bit cool, because the more you become involved in the heat of the argument, you lose to concentrate on the message that you are going to deliver. So you lack the style and the whole pronunciation and all those things. So, but I think to keep the style to the argument and to the debate, I think you should be a little bit more focused on your subject rather than what's going on in terms of emotions.
So I think both teams had done very well in doing their research. I was very impressed with the background research both teams had done. I think the proposition did well in having the TRIPS agreement as your base, because that is the base of our IP law. And the opposition also had done very well in bringing out one of the inadequacies, which is protection of piracy. But I think in both teams, what I saw is that although a lot of research has been done, as Mr. Bopitiya said, they had not focused on particular areas. And I think to be successful in a debate, you should have your points and be very thorough with your points and be very focused on what you're trying to bring out. For example, there was a mistake made where provisions relating to a patent was referred to as a provision in the copyright. Now, at this level, I think that's fine, because in your nervousness, you tend to forget your provisions and you're not as familiar with the law as you should be. But somehow, in later stages, I think as experience for your future, you should be very thorough in the areas, in your argument.
We would like to thank our distinguished panel of judges for taking time off their busy schedules and being with us here tonight. I believe your comments and insights were of valuable importance to all our budding debaters here. We're ready to reveal the best speaker of the debate today, who will walk away with a scholarship worth 175,000 courtesy achievers to study SEMA. The debater who was able to convince us that her or his stance is what should stand. The debater who was able to present his or her arguments with the greatest level of clarity. Ladies and gentlemen, revealing to you the best speaker of the debate today, walking away with a scholarship worth 175,000 is... Congratulations to Aisha Wahab from Lyceum International School, Nugegoda. The best speaker has been decided, but the most crucial and the most awaited for result has yet to be announced. The winning team for today. We have with us in Sylvester's and Lyceum two teams who were with us from season 1. Two teams who were able to make their mark within each debate that they participated in, bringing in new tactics, new ideas, new changes in strategy to each and every new debate that they faced. Ladies and gentlemen, we're ready to reveal to you the winning team of the debate today, taking a step ahead in the journey of season 2. And the winning team of the debate today is, it's a unanimous decision. Congratulations to Lyceum International School, Nugegoda. So Sylvester's College Candy will walk away with scholarships worth 125,000 courtesy achievers to study SEMA. We'll now invite the team to receive their scholarships from our judges and sponsors. ready to present a scholarship worth 175,000 courtesy achievers to study SEMA. To our best speaker for today, congratulations to Aisha Wahab. We're also ready to present the letters of appreciation to our winners for today. Let me now invite Life International School, the Debetor, to the podium to receive them. A job well done to Central Westerners. Congratulations to Life International School, Debetor. We'll see them during round 2 of season 2. Thank you for tuning in. Join in next week for another round of exciting debate. Good night.
But we can do much better. If you want to see us again, please vote for us.